My name is Sandra Larson, and I live in Boulder, Colorado. My friend Kit and I are collaborating on this story about Orchard Grove Mobile Home Park here in Boulder.
And I'm Kit Basom. I've lived at Orchard Grove for 20 years now, and I'm delighted to be telling you about my neighborhood.
This is a photograph from a community meeting at Orchard Grove. We're going to tell you more about this community and some of its special history. Orchard Grove Mobile Home Park lies in the heart of the city of Boulder at the northeast corner of Valmont and 30th Street.
The Boulder and White Rock Ditch runs through the community, forming part of a rare urban wildlife corridor that connects the mountains with the plains. I am lucky enough to live right on the ditch, among the mature trees and the wildlife that the water attracts. Shortly after I moved in, twin fawns were born under the protective skirt of a spruce right by my kitchen window.
Orchard Grove is home to about 450 people who live in the 215 homes on this site. Residents own their homes but rent the land the home sits on.
The people here are mostly young families and retirees, including immigrants from every continent. It's not intentionally diverse, but it has grown up that way organically over the years. If someone decided to create a community like this from scratch, you couldn't do it. There are people who were born here who are now raising their children here. People have deep roots. There are intergenerational friendships. In fact, the first people I met here were the kids. They were curious and friendly, and their parents were at work. One day I looked out the window and saw a little girl climbing a tree, and I knew I had to get to know her. And through a video, I became friends with her whole family and their friends, and they became my best friends in the park.
To put Orchard Grove in a broader context of our state and the nation, about 10% of housing stock in the United States consists of mobile homes alongside apartments and single-family homes and duplexes. About 20 million Americans live in mobile homes. Some are on private land, and about a third of them are in mobile home parks. In Colorado, that means there are over 100,000 mobile home park residents living in over 900 parks. Mobile home parks have been called the American dream on a budget. They are the least expensive, unsubsidized housing in Boulder and statewide, including mountain communities where there are good jobs, but housing is expensive. But they are not counted as affordable in state or city statistics. And mobile homes are not really very mobile. It's expensive to move them. They are easily damaged when they're moved. So residents can be stuck, unable to move their home, even if lot rents are raised or services are not provided. Big investors realize that money can be made from these captive residents.
I didn't realize when I moved here how different renting the land under your home was from renting an apartment or a house. For example, eviction from a mobile home park is not at all like eviction from an apartment. In a mobile home park, it's your house that is being evicted. Unless you can sell it really quickly, you're just going to lose it. And for many people, that's their life savings.
Social scientists who study mobile home communities find that people often live there a long time and develop strong social ties. Contrary to stereotypes, crime rates tend to be lower than in the surrounding communities. This is true in Orchard Grove too.
And people look out for each other. During the first year when I lived here, I was driving my old car into the neighborhood one day, and somebody I didn't recognize, didn't know, flagged me down. I rolled down my window, and he made with his mouth the sound that my car was making. I was embarrassed. I thought he was complaining about the noise. And I was stumbling over my words, trying to explain that I would get it fixed right away. Meanwhile, he was pointing at my left front wheel. And then he gestured to himself and said, "I fix," and handed me a slip of paper on which he'd already written the name of the part that I needed to buy in order for him to be able to fix my car, which he did. Another example of helping. Everyone knows which kids come home from school to empty houses because the adults are at work. So we look out for them. Remember the little girl climbing the tree? Once we got to know each other, she and her friends always hopped off the school bus and came directly to my kitchen or backyard. They essentially grew up at my place. And during that first school year, Avril learned to read and write English at my kitchen table.
Because of these deep connections, Orchard Grove residents have learned to stick up for themselves and for each other. The story starts in the 1980s when Boulder City Council created the zoning category of mobile home only in order to preserve Boulder's most affordable housing. Council intended to modify zoning for all the parks in the city, but the owners of Orchard Grove sent a threatening letter to all the residents telling them to object. Just why the city fell for this is unclear, but because of this underhanded tactic, Orchard Grove was the only park left in the city that was still zoned for medium density housing. At that time, the park was owned by a family corporation that hoped to sell the land as the city expanded around it. Less restrictive zoning would help to raise the sale price, hence the threatening letter. In 2008, the owners did try to sell to a developer who planned to replace the mobile homes with condos, thus displacing residents. But someone found out about the proposed sale.
And that triggered an overnight emergency action. So when people woke up the next morning, they found notices describing the proposed sale and asking them if they could to attend a city council meeting that evening to plead for council's help. It was such short notice, we didn't know if anyone would show up. But in fact, everyone did. Grandmothers, babies, teenage boys holding babies. We didn't fit in the council chambers. We spilled down the stairs and filled the lobby. And people were wearing their Sunday best out of respect for the place and the proceedings. It gave me chills to see people who had been disenfranchised show up and be recognized. We got city council's attention. And they took action to rectify the mistake made back in the 1980s. With city council's help, we had saved our community. But the owners figured we had lost them millions of dollars. Of course, we hadn't. It was their own unscrupulous behavior that had set them up for disappointment. Even so, they took out their anger on us with huge rent increases and vicious, often personal retaliatory action. The owners cut down the tree in front of a community leader's home, and one of them watched as he forced her to dig up her native xeric garden, planted over years, because he said it used too much water. With help from the city and others, we made a bid to buy the property ourselves, offering above market value, and the owners didn't even acknowledge our offer. All this made the news and attracted the attention of an economist now at Duke University, Charles Becker, inspiring him to explore the economics of mobile home parks. No economist had ever studied this before. He hoped to provide data that others could use to argue for reform of what many mobile home park residents experience as a feudal system, where the landowners can do whatever they want and homeowners are nearly powerless. More about Charles Becker later. These events also inspired City Council to support an effort to strengthen the state law protecting mobile home park residents. Since they didn't know the issues well, they asked some experts, Orchard Grove residents, to tell them what provisions should be added to the Colorado Mobile Home Park Act. We researched the laws and court cases in other states, and then drafted the bill we wished we had. Such a bill was passed in 2010, although most of its teeth had been pulled in committee.
In 2015, the owners did sell the property to Riverstone, an out-of-state corporation. Soon, Riverstone announced that they would bill residents extra for water, violating the lease terms that say water is included in the rent.
Riverstone insisted that they knew the law well. They didn't realize that they were talking with people who'd helped write the law. We all knew the fees were illegal. And one resident, Lisa Ferreira, offered herself as the test case by refusing to pay the water fee. Riverstone tried to evict her. She took them to court and lost. So she appealed and won. Then Riverstone asked the state Supreme Court to review the case, but they declined. So the ruling in Lisa's favor not only stood, but applied to everyone. Everyone in Orchard Grove would get their money back from the illegal water fees. And the decision set a precedent for similar cases anywhere in the state. Another hard-won victory. But to actually get the money, we had to take Riverstone back to court, and it took another year to make them finally pay. Meanwhile, Riverstone continued to retaliate, raising rents and threatening people with eviction for violating rules that didn't exist, such as towing cars away in the middle of the night over parking rules invented on the spot. It was unbelievable. And some people never got their cars back. The enforcement of non-existent rules like this is still going on. Also, although the court decision could be cited in similar cases statewide, rarely are cases taken to court because mobile home park residents generally don't have the time or money to initiate a lawsuit. So without any enforcement mechanism, the Colorado Mobile Home Park Act was basically inaccessible, dormant, until Edie Hooten, who was the state House representative for North Boulder, introduced a bill in 2019 that would provide the needed enforcement. Here's where the story gets really fun. Remember the Duke professor who started researching mobile home park economics back in 2008? TV news satirist John Oliver drew on his research, interviewing Professor Becker at length, to craft one of his scathing reports about predatory practices of mobile home park owners. And Edie Hooten used that TV segment to promote her bill.
Edie's version of the video required considerable cleaning up of Oliver's colorful language, as you know if you watch that show. But she succeeded in gaining both Republican and Democratic votes. The bill passed and was signed into law by Governor Paulus in 2019. It creates a system so that residents can report illegal practices of park owners without having to hire a lawyer or go to court.
So, the story of Orchard Grove struggles in 2008 moved east to Duke University, then went national, thanks to John Oliver, and returned to Colorado just in time to influence the vote on landmark legislation sponsored by Orchard Grove's State House representative. And that law now protects thousands of mobile home park residents across the state. I just think it's so cool how the suffering and perseverance of Orchard Grove residents boomerang cross country and back, expanding its influence as it went.
Orchard Grove's activism continues to have ripples with the help of local legislators, including Steve Fenberg. Just this year, 2 more bills became law. One protects mobile home park residents from retaliation by park owners. We've seen how much that is needed. The second helps homeowners buy the land in their park if the current owner wants to sell or redevelop. This too would have been useful for Orchard Grove in the past. Meanwhile, things have continued to happen at Orchard Grove. In the winter of 2019, another water crisis. This time, broken water mains leave residents without water for a week. Boulder County arranged for delivery of emergency water, and the city helped to make repairs, even though those pipes are within the park and thus Riverstone's responsibility.
It was City Council member Mary Young who got off the bus on her way home from work one day to see if the rumors were true about Orchard Grove's desperate straits. She sounded the alarm and got the wheels turning, got the city and the county to step up because the park owners were nowhere to be found.
Later that same year, residents reached out to Elevation's credit union for help when rent payments paid by money orders were stolen. Elevations helped people set up checking accounts to make more secure payments. These stories show that Orchard Grove residents are strong, resilient, and collaborative, but they're also vulnerable. The pandemic has hit this neighborhood hard. Many people have lost their jobs. Others work in situations that put them at risk.
My neighbor Dignora, who works in a large commercial kitchen, not designed for social distancing, lives in fear of bringing home the virus to her young son and elderly parents. This is my quirky, generous, funny, kind next door neighbor, Jeff. I asked him to take a picture of himself wearing the mask that a friend of mine made for him because she knew he was a janitor. At the beginning of the pandemic, he was out of work for a week, but as an essential worker, he was asked to return. Back at work, he was exposed to someone with COVID-19, forcing him into self-quarantine. Fortunately, he didn't get sick, but his experience and Dignora's woke me up to the fact that essential workers are the people who do the jobs that allow the rest of us to be safe. We call them heroes, but that doesn't seem like the right word to describe people forced to work in dangerous situations because they can't afford not to. Of course, the pandemic has just illuminated a situation that already existed.
To help Orchard Grove residents who've been hurt by the pandemic, the neighborhood has partnered with the City of Boulder to establish a support fund for people experiencing financial need. The city's Department of Housing and Human Services receives the funds from donors and discreetly distributes them to residents who request help. Wanda Pellegrina Calda manages the fund. We've provided a link to download a form that explains where and how to make donations. Before the pandemic, I didn't know the city could help in this way. We can support people who are having hard times. Because the city manages the fund, it can do this in a way that is knowledgeable about the community, sensitive to individuals' needs, and accountable to donors. I've donated to this fund, and if you have the resources to do so, I hope you'll consider it too. One moral of this story, for me, is the importance of good government. People must be able to turn to local and state officials to get help with community problems. Responsive officials will not only help with that immediate problem, but will listen to the core issues and work to develop policies that help to solve such problems for more people and over time. Good government matters, and that means elections matter. You saw this photograph earlier. It was taken at one of the community meetings held in 2008 to stop redevelopment of the park. So this image also communicates collective strength and community activism.
I need to be clear that Orchard Grove is not Shangri-La. We are normal, flawed people. We have baggage. But this community is not brittle because it's not constructed. It grew. And because it's alive, it has resiliency and has the strength to reach out and connect with the larger community. Thank you for listening.